Well, welcome to episode 6 of the Wombs of Glory podcast. I am joined with another guest today, and she is actually my mother in law. So I'm very honored that you're here, and I'm excited to dive into today's episode.
I'm excited also. I'm honored that you asked me. Thank you very, very much, Natalia. I hope that I have things to share that might be of service to your followers. And yeah, I'm excited for the conversation and the sharing.
Oh yeah, been looking forward to this all day. I've been really excited. I'm always excited to record these episodes. I think this one will be really good, and I think it's going to touch a lot of people. So I'm really excited to get started. Well, I will open in prayer just to get us started. So Father, we just come before you, and we just thank you that we get to create community and we get to share our stories. And I know today there's going to be so much good things shared. So um, I just ask that we prepare our hearts to be able to share what we think needs to be said. And we just ask for the spirit of wisdom and the spirit of peace to just come about the area that I'm in and the area that Joan is sitting in as well. And we just thank you for your glory. And we thank you that we get to sit together and share our stories today. So, Father, we just ask that you just allow our souls to take a step back and our spirits to step forward so we can share what we need to share. So, amen.
Amen.
Okay, well, I'm going to start off with I asked this a couple episodes ago and I really like it. So I think I'm going to keep it in kind of every episode. But where do you kind of see the Lord most in your life right now?
Oh, that's a hard question to ask because I see him in my life in so many places. So I don't think I could narrow it down to one place. I see him in my garden as new life is beginning to spring forth. I see him in the evolving journeys of my adult children. I see him in my marriage, and I definitely see him when I sit with my patients, my clients who are hurting people. And yeah, I really love to meet him there in addressing those problems, if you will, because I believe those problems are often so much bigger than me. And so, yeah, to kind of lean into faith in those moments with my clients and my patients, whether it's spoken out loud or not, definitely see him there, but in all those other places too.
Yeah, that's cool. I love the garden. That's so cute.
I thought you.
I mean, among all the things, but that's just cute.
Yeah.
um, you can just take a second to kind of introduce yourself or introduce the family, whatever you want to share. Just tell us kind of who you are.
Okay, well, as Natalia introduced me, my name is Joan. In some circles, I'm known as Dr. Joan Hilson, clinical psychologist. In other circles, I'm known as Mum. I'm known as wife. I'm known as daughter. I'm known as sister. And I hope that I'm known as friend as well. So I'm 57 years old, and I always have to do the math, but I have been married for, it will be 32 years this summer to my husband, Andrew. And together we have 3 adult children, one of whom is your husband, Sean. He is our
Yeah.
youngest. And we have our daughter, Catherine, and we have our eldest son, Colin. And so yeah, that's a little bit about who I am and what my family structure is, I guess. And I'm the daughter of Bernard and Beatrice, and I have a sister and I have a brother, and my mom and dad, back to them for a moment, just because they're so formative and influential in my life. I will share with you that they have been married for 63 years. Yes, they just celebrated their 63rd wedding anniversary. And they are just so full of love and fun and spirit. So they're an incredibly important part of my identity also.
Yeah, I can just speak to them as grandparents, and um, I no longer have any grandparents on either side. I lost grandma in 2021. And so it was really interesting to not have like such a spiritual head of that side of the family, but
Mm.
then to be married into such a like strong spiritual head of your family was really cool. So I get that on both sides. So I love being able to be their granddaughter-in-law.
Aw, well, they love having you
Hopefully they'll
as,
hear this.
yes, I'm sure they will, and they love having you as a granddaughter as well, Natalia. And knowing your Grandma Mary as I did, and as my mom and dad did for a wee little bit, far too short of an amount of time, I know that they would be very, very honored that you see them in that way, that you see them as a spiritual head or heads of our family.
Mhm.
They'll be very touched by that. I think that will bring a
Yeah.
tear to both of their eyes.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
such a
I just,
delight to get them, or to be able to witness them and your Grandma Mary all together, the three of them, give the blessing, say grace at your and Sean's wedding banquet. It was beautiful.
yeah. Yeah. I just adore them. And even my mom is like, anytime we talk about them, she just tries to get everyone to meet them because we just all love them so much. And it's funny that you brought them up because I was thinking about them earlier today. And so, yeah, they're just, yeah, everyone just adores them. They're just the best.
Well, they'll be home in 2 more days.
Oh, okay. Well, that's awesome. Um, Well, I feel like I've just been hearing all week that kind of you listen to people all day and you kind of touched on your work a little bit. So I wanted to just give you the opportunity to share your story and share kind of what you want to share and what you feel like, you can help people through seasons that you have walked through that you feel
Mm.
like, they're walking through maybe in the moment. So I kind of just wanted to give you the space to share what you wanted to share so we can kind of start off more so kind of that like early marriage, school, all that kind of season of life before you became a mom.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that although you're introducing the idea of my work, I'm glad that you're going back to the beginning, because I wouldn't be doing the work that I do today in the way that I do it without the beginning. And regardless of my career in healthcare, um, I see my identity not first and foremost in terms of the title that I hold and the work that I do in my life today for a career and as my profession, but I see my identity as wife and mother first and foremost. So I'm glad we're going to talk about the beginning
Mm-hmm.
because I think that that is central. And even when people look at my Instagram, for example, I think I've got it listed. I haven't actually looked at my biography super recently, but I think I list myself as wife, mother, and then psychologist to first responders. And I was very intentional about
Mm-hmm.
doing it in that order. So I guess I'll start with wife. So
Mm-hmm.
Andrew and I were married in 1991. We met on a ski hill in the United States. I like to tell this story when he crashed into a tree and I stopped to make sure that he was okay. So he's a very good skier, and today he would be a much better skier than I am today. But I like to joke that he crashed and I stopped and made sure he was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just really truly the beginning. And we each got home from this ski trip and he asked me on a date. And we went on our first date on April the 14th, 1989. I still remember the date. I remember what he was wearing. I was quite taken with him. He remembers what I was wearing. And we remember what movie we went to and what we had for a meal, what restaurant we ate. And we were married less than 2 years later. And he would share that he had an opportunity to go work for a very big company in Toronto upon graduation, or he was going to go to South America and do some missionary type work in South America, but then he met me and he changed his mind and he followed me to Calgary, where I was doing my second degree. And so I'm glad that he gave up those opportunities for our relationship. And so that's what we did. We came to Calgary, and a fairly short while later, on my birthday, I guess it would be the following year, he came out for dinner with myself and my mom and dad, or we went out for dinner with my mom and dad for my birthday. And I knew something was up when he said, I forgot to say something to your dad. And
Oh.
he went to my mom and dad, and he did not ask for their permission because he's not that way. But he told them that he was going to propose and asked for
Mm.
their blessing. And we drove back to Calgary, and he proposed in a place called Riley Park in Calgary. And then we were married the following August, and had our honeymoon and lived in Calgary for a few months, and then we were off to London, Ontario, where he was transferred for his work and I was starting my PhD. And it was an incredibly exciting time. I mean, we were brand new married. We had our
Mhm.
little apartment together. He was taking this big step in his career. I was starting my graduate studies in like the program of my dreams at the University of
Mhm.
Western Ontario. And all these great and wonderful things were happening, but it was so crazy stressful. They were all changes and they were good change, but it was too much too fast, it felt like.
Mhm.
And I remember saying to him one night, do you want to go to bed? Do you want to go to sleep? I'm tired of being awake. I just felt like I couldn't handle it anymore. But we went to London, and that was a super great experience. And I think it was a really great experience for our marriage. You've probably picked up and you know that I'm super, super close with my mom and dad. And I think it was important that we moved away and really centered on each other and on our marriage. And I'm not saying that that should be every journey. I'm obviously that's not your and Sean's journey. I'm so blessed that you share a home with us. It's just a really delightful experience to have you and Sean. I need to say that because I think we all have to walk our own journey, and one journey is not better than another. They're
Mhm.
just different. But for me, it was important for me, I think, to really center myself on our marriage, which I know you center yourself on your marriage and on God. But in order for me to center myself on our marriage, I think it was a real blessing um, that we went a little bit further away. And we were crazy broke, and I couldn't be flying home to mom and dad every month or even every 6 months or every year. And in those days, I'm sounding very ancient here, but in those days, you had to pay for long distance phone calls. So,
Mm.
I maybe talked to my mom and dad once a week and watched how long that phone call was because the pennies mattered. But then fast forward a little bit, Andrew was transferred back to Calgary. I wasn't finished my PhD yet, but of course I wanted to be with my husband. So we came back together. I finished my degree from afar, and online learning wasn't even a thing then, so that was a little bit of a
Mhm.
challenge, but it worked. And then I was, you know, ready to, I guess, start the next part of our journey, which I desired that to be having babies. But that did not happen in the way that we desired and planned for. And by the way, I can go on and on. So you stop me anytime you want and
No, just
ask
no.
questions.
I don't
Or
I don't really have that many questions, so no,
or
just
offer
I'm here
comments
to
or
listen.
seek clarification or whatever. But
Yeah.
anyway, that was a really super, super painful part of our life. Um, because I and we so desperately wanted to start a family, and it wasn't happening, and it wasn't happening. And of course, aunties would see us at family functions and ask, "Oh, is there a bun in the oven yet?" Or, "When are you having babies?" And I just wanted to shake and I wanted to scream at them.
Mm-hmm.
And I got angry inside, but I know that that was because I was just so hurt and so lost. And I had fantasies of saying really crude things to my aunts. "You were asking me when these babies are coming." And I'm like, "I don't know. Would you like to tell me how to do it?" And other such things. But in my own mind, I wasn't even being that polite about it. I was using
Mm-hmm.
other words that I would never dare say to my aunties and such. And, other women my age and relatives and such, they were getting pregnant and they were having babies. And yeah, that was just a really, really hard season of my life. And, I would sit in church and, on Mother's Day, a priest would say, "Will all the mothers and grandmothers stand up and receive a special blessing?" Or they'd be given a flower on the way out the door on Mother's Day. And of course, I didn't feel like I could stand up and get a blessing or
Mm-hmm.
get a tulip on the way out the door. And yeah, it was really, really hard. And I don't know if we talk about that enough and really validate women and their husbands and support them. And I know it's all well-meaning when the aunties, etc. I'm picking on aunties, but I don't mean that
Mm-hmm.
specifically. I'm just using that as kind of a archetype, I suppose.
Yeah.
These people in our lives who ask about when the babies are coming, I know they're well-meaning, um, but I wish that maybe we didn't do that quite so casually, because it can be really hurtful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in like fertility doula training, that's like the number one thing that they tell us. And it's like a lot of people are walking that journey of not being able to conceive in the way that they want to. And it's like they don't have a community around them that even understands why it maybe is even hard to, you know, show up on Mother's Day or go to church
Yes.
on Mother's Day or all those kinds of things. So yeah, it's it's being talked about, but not enough. And we're being like trained in that, which is really special to be able to help people walk through that season. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I want to help people walk through that season in a very different way than a lot of fertility doulas, just,
Hmm.
being able to help them walk that journey with Jesus or whatever they want that to look like. But yeah, it's it's tough to be able to explain to people why you feel a certain way.
Well, I think it's a real gift to those who will need your ministry, and I use the word intentionally, that you can bring the approach to women and couples who are struggling in in not fulfilling what they so very desperately want, and might even
Mm-hmm.
feel called. They might feel that that is to be their path, that is to be their journey, that is their vocation or their calling, i.e., parenthood. And when
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't happen, I mean, it's sad, it's frustrating, it's anger provoking, it can be lonely,
Mm-hmm.
and I suppose can also oftentimes be a challenge to faith. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that's been
Yeah.
part of our story. But obviously, I'm sitting here and I've got 3 children, and but there's also been pregnancy loss along the way, twice. And yeah, you can well imagine, I think anybody could, that when finally
Mm-hmm.
you're conceiving by whatever means, um,
Mm-hmm.
come to be the case for you, that when that doesn't result in a live birth, just, yeah, more pain,
Mm-hmm.
etc.
Mm-hmm.
I saw an interesting thing. I didn't have time to read the article, but I'm going to go back to it. The headline, it was like a first person story. And the question in the headline was, um, if I didn't give birth to a live child, does that mean I'm not a mom? And
Mm.
what a thought provoking question, hey?
Yeah. Yeah.
How
I don't
many of
even
us
have
are
words.
mums? although we may
Yeah.
never have held, you know, toddlers in our arms and watched children
Mhm.
grow up and graduate and get married. But how many of us, nonetheless, might still actually be
Mhm.
moms?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a interesting headline for an article.
Yes, yeah, I must go back and read it. Um,
Yeah.
so I guess fast forwarding a little bit, once those babies started to come for Andrew and I, they started to come, and we had 3 children in 3.5 years. So
Mhm.
I got what I was praying for.
Mhm.
And I don't remember that time of our lives when our children were super young in totality. I definitely have absolute memories of specific things that were crazy or brought me lots of joy. Um, but I think I was too tired to consolidate all the
Yeah.
memories of those early years. But man, we had a lot of fun, and I
Mhm.
was a wife and mom first, just like I was alluding to earlier. And I mostly put my career on hold, and I was just so happy to do that. And I had the support of Andrew in doing that, and the support of family in doing that, who were, super helpful to us.
Mhm.
And yeah, just a lot of joy in those years, and a lot of busyness, and a lot of craziness, and lots of trips to the zoo with 3 little people in tow in the little red wagon, and
Mhm.
lunches. And I was blessed by really good girlfriends that lived on the same block as us in Calgary, and we would walk, and we would have tea together, and we would commiserate. And my friend Sue taught me how to sew cloth diapers. I'm not sure that I
Oh,
ever actually used them. I think they became dust cloths at some other point in time, because I don't think I finished sewing them or something. But
that's
anyways, those
awesome.
were good years, and good friendship. And Andrew and I felt so incredibly blessed. And, we had our children baptized, and I feel like we went to church when we could. And there was lots of gratitude and lots of thankfulness for the life that we lived. And Andrew was awesome. He would come home, and he would kind of take over things, and I would put on my running gear, and I would go for a little run. And it's funny, if you ask Sean, or if you ask our daughter, or if you ask Catherine, or if you ask our eldest son Colin, do you remember mom's lime green running room jacket? They'll say yes. And I remember how it smelled. Like they see that jacket, which is still hanging in the closet, and they're like, I remember the smell of that jacket. And
That's
what I
funny.
imagine is that when I got home from my run, they would probably hug my legs, and those jackets are a bit longer. And anyway, they remember the smell, and I don't think it was very good.
That's funny.
But yes, Andrew was super supportive, and I'd get a break and go for a run and come home. And Andrew's always been a fantastic dad, at least from my perspective. I hope the kids would say the same. And fun, and playing, and building forts, and making up crazy stories with their stuffed little animals, and reading them The Hobbit, and I think editing out the scary parts, and same with Lord of the Rings. And anyway, he's been a really good dad, and I'm a blessed woman that he's the father of our children.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, every time we like all get together, which isn't super often because we don't all live in the same city anymore. But they just have the craziest stories. Like they could talk like literally for days on end just of different stories. And Sean has a very bad habit of telling me the same story multiple times, but when you guys all get together, there's no same story.
That's
They
nice.
just have so many memories. And it's funny because we live in the basement where a lot of those memories took place. And sometimes they'll just randomly be like, oh, yeah, like this is where the trains were or whatever.
Oh,
And so it's funny that he sometimes remembers all those. And yeah, it's pretty funny.
yeah, because that was an undeveloped basement for all of our kids' growing up years. We moved here when Colin was about 9, so Katie would have been 7.5, and Sean would have been 6. And so from those years forward, it was undeveloped. And yeah, I think there was a lot of craziness down there,
Yeah.
including a reptile collection and including snakes that got out, and they didn't tell their mom about it until they found the snake 2 days later, and
My gosh.
so on and so forth.
Um,
But I'm grateful for Catherine's reptile collection because I've repurposed her reptile lights as grow lights, as you know, and I started so many seedlings this spring. And so if it weren't for her reptile collection, I wouldn't have had 4 foot long fluorescent fixtures into which insert grow bulbs and experience the beauty of creativity. I keep looking to my left because that's where it's all been
mhm,
set up. Although with the nice weather, it's outside today.
mhm. Yeah. What was kind of, or I guess I should say, like, how important was it to you to raise your kids with kind of the same faith that you had?
Um, so to be perfectly honest about that, um, I think that we actually did that by default. Um, we defaulted to both having been raised in the Roman Catholic faith. And so, kind of culturally and by virtue of family history, it was just something we did. And I'm not going to say it wasn't important or it wasn't formative, but I just really want to be
Mhm,
honest. It wasn't like we are going to raise our children this way. Cute,
mhm,
funny story. I think it's funny. Maybe, I don't know if anybody else does, but so Andrew is from the Edmonton area. I'm from the Calgary area. But we were both raised Catholic, and we joked in our pre-marriage preparation that we could agree on what religion to raise our children in, but we couldn't agree whether or not to raise them as Calgary Flames fans or Edmonton Oilers.
oh. That's hilarious.
But
They're
there's
all
more
Edmonton
Edmonton
Oilers
Oilers
fans.
jerseys in this house than there are Calgary
Yes.
Flames jerseys.
Sometimes when the hockey game is on here, I'll cheer for the other team, and it just makes Sean so mad because it's just funny.
Wives must maintain truth to themselves and not defer to their husbands
Yeah.
entirely, right?
Yeah,
So you
exactly,
cheer
and
for
I
another
watch
team.
yeah, and I watch sports too, so I understand what it's like to be, or I used to. I understand what it's like to be a devoted sports fan.
Well,
So
because you're also
I understand why he gets so mad, so that's why I do it.
well, you're also an athlete.
Yeah.
But so back to your question though, which is a really good question, and I'm happy to answer honestly. So that's my answer to your question. But as a follow-up, I would just add that um, I try hard nowadays and have for many years to be more intentional about my relationship with God
Mhm.
and faith and prayer. And, what I was going to say was I hope that how we raised our children, I hope that that planted some mustard seeds in their soul and have faith that that will grow into a beautiful tree and bear fruit and such. But as I'm saying that out loud, I'm like, okay, where was the seed planted? Sure, I hope it was planted in our children,
Mhm.
but I think it was planted in me. And I think that that probably started 50 odd years ago,
Mm.
being raised with parents who, for as long as I've known them, have been very, very strong in their faith and very disciplined and intentional about their prayer life. Like, we grew up with the Bible and this little book of daily meditations called God Calling. I can still see that book in my mind's eye.
Mhm.
That was on the breakfast table. And it wasn't necessarily the case that we were reading the Bible as a family. In fact, we didn't. Although, when my grandma Mary, my mom's mom, came to visit, we said nightly prayers as a family and said the rosary because we're Catholic. But regardless of how much the children were involved in that, I mean, yes, we went to church every Sunday, but in terms of daily faith practice, my mom and dad, in a very open way, but not in a pushy way, they quietly practiced their faith right in front of us, and we couldn't help but notice it.
Mhm.
So I I guess the seeds were planted in me then.
Yeah.
And a fair bit later in my adult life and in the life of my own family, our own family, um, I hope that those seeds germinated and grew. So yeah, am
Mm.
I a blessing to my children? I don't know. Are they a blessing to me? Absolutely, because I think their lives have increased my own faith, if you will.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I like that. Um, well, we can kind of jump into maybe when your kids kind of got a little older, what that looked like, kind of incorporating motherhood with your work and kind of what that looked like, the balance. You know, was it hard to go back to work? Kind of just what that season looked like.
Okay. So, I let's see. I defended my PhD, and so I had to travel back to London because, as I said, I came back here with Andrew, of course,
Mm-hmm.
um, and finished the work I had to finish here. But then, as part of my program, you have to go back and you need to defend your research, and it's a big deal and it's scary and all that stuff. And by then, I was 8.5 months pregnant with our first, Colin.
Mm.
And I think there's actually rules against women like me flying nowadays that close to their due date, but I don't know. I got on a plane and money was still tight. Andrew could not afford to come with me, but my mom could afford a plane ticket. And so
Mm.
she came to London with me in case I went into labor. And so I defended my dissertation, which is, as I said, a big deal. It's very scary. It's very stressful. I thought it could throw me into labor, but I didn't go into labor. I passed. And there's this cute picture of me sitting in the London airport knitting a baby sweater. So I don't know if I even got that
Aw.
sweater finished before Colin was born, but came home, had Colin. As I said, the kids really little. I don't think I worked again. My memory's not great for that time. I didn't work for a while anyway, but I had had a very kind supervisor along the way in Calgary. And I knew that I wanted to practice as a psychologist, but first and foremost, I wanted to be a mom. But if I ever had any hope of practicing as a psychologist, I kind of had to keep networked a little bit, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I maybe saw 3 clients a week, one evening after Andrew got home and two another evening after Andrew got home. And so I kind of kept my hand in it. And it wasn't until um, the kids were in school, all 3 of them, full time, before I significantly increased my hours.
Mm.
And at that point in time, and for all the years until our youngest, your husband, was graduated from high school, I kept my hours very limited. For the most part, I drove them to school every morning because where we live, the school bus won't come because the road is too sketchy. So I drove them to school every morning and then I went to work, which meant I wasn't working before 9 a.m. And then
Mm-hmm.
I went back to the school and I picked them up at the end of every day. So that meant I only worked until about 2:15 or something. So if you do the math, that's really not many clients a day. And it was really important to me that I still volunteered in the school and that I took professional development days off and I went on as many field trips as I could. Not that I went on every one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that, summers I didn't really work that much. Although Colin and Sean and Katie will tell funny stories of when they were old enough to stay at home, I would leave them with a list of chores that I thought would take most of the day. And I'd leave them with lunch and snacks and all that stuff. And then I'd say, when all the chores are done, you can watch a show or watch a movie. And I figured, okay, they'll watch that show or that movie and then I'll get home. It was only maybe a year or two ago that Catherine and Sean confessed to me, oh, we could burn through all those chores in like half an hour, 45 minutes, and we'd watch such and such a movie over and over again all day long. I had no idea. But anyway, I tried to coordinate parenthood and family with working. But even my own clients, I would say to them, I'm sorry, I'm a wife and mother first. I may need to
Mm-hmm.
cancel appointments if my kids are sick. If there's a field trip, I'm going to go on it. And so I'll have to cancel your appointment and you'll be seen in 2 weeks' time instead of 1 week time or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did. And I feel really blessed that I got to spend that much time with our children. And, you know, I've thought about this a lot over the last few years. I mean, I think historically, in kind of contemporary times, women have been encouraged that you can have it all. You can have your family and you can have your career. And I think that's a really cruel message to send to most women, unless they've got nannies and cooks and I don't know what all else. But there's only so much energy and there's only so much time in the day. And I think part of my journey has been about making choices and, yeah, not being able to have it all. And I'm fine with that. Like I'm thrilled with what I have had. And so I think that that's important for me, at least. I don't know if it's important for anybody else, but I think it's important for me to acknowledge that there's choices to be made, and we will hopefully have what we have and be blessed with what we're going to be blessed with. And but kind of getting away from this false and I think again cruel expectation that we can have it all. And I say cruel because that puts way too much demand on us as women and mothers, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there was such an interesting movement for like, okay, like women can do everything men can do, so let's all go get careers. But then now, like when you're on social media, it's just like there's such an influx of like, no, like we shouldn't have careers. We should just be like housewives and mothers and homemakers and all that kind of stuff. And someone, I think it was my sister, she was just like, that's just not, it's just not realistic to be like, you can, you know, okay, like just have a career and not put your family first, or vice versa, of like put your family first only and like not have a career. But like there's such a, you can have such like a cool balance of it both,
Mm-hmm.
but then set boundaries for yourself where it's like, okay, yes, I am going to go back to work, but my family comes first, and making that known. So I feel like we're kind of in like a weird society where it's kind of like a mix of both, but I don't
Well,
know,
and
it's kind of
maybe
hard
it's
to
just
explain.
about reestablishing balance, right?
Yeah.
Healthy balance. And how do I balance myself? Um, Sorry, our dog up here is fretting. So I'm petting him and I may need to get up and let him out or something. But balance within ourselves as spiritual beings, as physical beings, as emotional beings, as mental beings,
Mm-hmm.
and also in terms of the external manifestation of all of that, which is in our roles, whatever that looks like for a given woman in a given family. And I think if my work has taught me anything, it's that there's not necessarily always one right path for a given individual. And as a
Mm-hmm.
woman of faith, I think I'm constantly on a quest of figuring out what is God's path for me. And am I
Mm-hmm.
fighting against it, or am I discovering it, or am I rolling with the flow, or am I surrendering
Mm-hmm.
to it? Am I embracing it?
Yeah.
And obviously, God's going to have a different design for each of us, a different journey, a
Mm-hmm.
different path. And
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I'm on that, like right now, is like stepping into just what I feel like God has for my life, and then like kind of building it. Like last episode, we really just talked about, like building things in the way to live the life of your dreams. And so it's like, yeah, that's like really cool, but it's even cooler when you get to do it in partnership with Jesus and hear like what he kind of has for your life. And then it makes it so much easier because you're just getting clarity for it. So,
yes, exactly that
yeah.
discernment. I was thrilled to get your message today. And and you worded it like what I've been hearing all week is that I listen to people all day long. And I thought, who's she been talking to that she's been hearing this all week? And then I
Oh.
clued in. I'm like, oh, I know where she heard that.
Funny. Yeah, I guess I could have clarified. That's
No,
actually
you don't
funny.
need to clarify that. It speaks to my
Yeah.
assumptions. If I can, I just want to touch on obviously, as you've articulated, there's many seasons in our journey. And I suppose I've talked about some of my seasons of motherhood.
Mhm.
And I've talked about it being busy, and I've talked about it being joy filled, and I've talked about it being fun, and I've talked about it being crazy, and I've talked a little bit about in the earlier years how I balanced that um, with my priority, which was being a mom. But I
Mhm.
guess what we haven't talked about is sometimes things are tough, right? They
Mhm.
can be really tough. They can be really frightening. And I think for me as a woman, and for Andrew and I as a couple, um, that's where um, the gas pedal hit the floor in terms of our faith
Mhm.
journey.
Mhm.
And yeah, lots of tears, lots of fear, lots of pain, and testing of faith and questioning. But at the end of the day, also having faith and
Mhm.
putting trust in God and putting trust in the goodness of His plan for our family, for ourselves, for our kids, and also for me being supported by other women in that, and
Mhm.
really connecting with a few specific friends who are incredibly strong in their faith. And when I was too weak or exhausted to pray, knowing that I had friends who would stand in and pray with me, and for our family, that has simultaneously been incredibly painful, but also incredibly beautiful part of our
Mhm.
journey. And yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. What was it like to kind of include people in those journeys? Like, was the hardest part asking for, you know, prayers or help, or, what was that kind of
Oh,
like
I
to
was so
include
desperate. I
people?
had no anxiety
Oh,
whatsoever about
okay.
asking.
Okay.
um, so no, for me, although I recognize that often that can be hard for people, for sure. I suppose what, uh, yeah, no, um, often people, what I'm kind of hung up on here, right, and figuring out how to articulate this is some people would maybe question me, and they question me in such a kind and compassionate and caring way.
Mm.
Question me, oh, is it hard for you because you're a psychologist that things aren't perfect?
Mm.
And
Right.
my honest answer to that was no, because what I do for a living has never instilled in me any idea that I've got all the answers or that me or my family are going to
Mm.
be perfect.
Mm.
So I didn't have that expectation of perfection. And
Right.
so um, the intersection between what I do for a living and whatever challenges might befall my family, um, that wasn't a challenge for me. People expected it might be a challenge. So when you asked, was the
Right.
hardest thing X? Well, no, that
Mhm.
wasn't hard. There's this other thing, Y, letter
Mhm.
Y, not WHY, that that I think some people thought might have been hard,
Mhm.
but that wasn't hard either because I didn't put expectations on myself of perfection.
Mhm.
And I still, to this day, in my work with clients, I approach it as a journey
Mhm.
that I'm on with clients, and I hope I know some things, and I hope I can be helpful. And I know lots of things, and I do know that I can have the potential to be helpful, but I don't expect ever to have perfect answers, because the answers aren't mine to give. They come from
Mm,
someplace else.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Um, well, you can go if you want, just a little bit about your work, what you do, and you work with a lot of people who are just, walking through things that, we just can't even imagine. So kind of what advice do you kind of have for people walking through just unimaginable things?
So yeah, as I alluded to earlier, I'm a clinical psychologist, and my job is to assess and to provide treatment to first responders, mostly police, and also to military veterans, who, as you say, they have witnessed unimaginable things, and often again and again and again.
Mhm.
Like, most of us probably will have something unimaginably difficult, maybe even traumatic at some point in time in our lives. But first responders, the police officers among us, they witness those things again and again and again, and they often end up very, very psychologically hurt. And so that's what I do. And I've been doing that for a long time. And now, with all of our kids growing, and I guess I'm making up for lost time in terms of the number of hours I put in today compared to the number of
Mhm.
hours that I didn't put in when our kids were young. And I never set out to like make up for lost time. That's not what I mean.
Mhm.
It's just how it's evolved. I am so busy in work that I see a lot of clients every day. I see clients Monday to Friday, but I do take holidays.
Mhm.
Um, and so often people, and often the clients themselves, say, "How do you do this? You must have vicarious PTSD yourself." And I maybe have a titch of that, one might say. There's lots of movies I don't like to watch. And anyway,
Mhm.
there's different things. I know I've been impacted, but I don't feel it as a burden. It's just something that has changed about me, but not in a bad way necessarily, I don't
Mhm.
think. Although maybe you should have spouses, partners, husbands on this program and ask them about their
Yeah.
wives' stories. See how they're
Yeah.
different. But anyway, um, I guess what I want to say is that, um, I don't want to make this all about me, but I quickly want to say this. I think I'm able to help people because I do believe that I have been led to
Mm.
this work. I think it's my vocation. I think it's my ministry. I think I've been given the heart and the mind and the soul for this work. And I really approach my work as not my career, not my job, not my income. I mean, it is all those things, and I'm blessed that
Mhm.
I have it. But I do believe it's my opportunity to be of service. And your grandfather in law, my dad, taught us from a very early age to respect those who serve us. And his one of his older brothers, one of his oldest but not the oldest brother, he was a soldier in World War II. He actively
Mhm.
served in northern Italy. And I think that meant something, or means something, to my dad. This Uncle Gordon, he's dead now, but um, I think a seed was planted there too, in terms of me being of service to people in uniform. So I think I'm able to endure the work that I do, um, because I don't think I'm doing that work alone.
Mm.
I think a hedge of protection is around me as I do that work. And I don't feel overly damaged by it, although you live with me, so maybe you feel differently. I don't
No,
know.
I don't think so.
Yes.
It's funny that you say that because I was literally just gonna say like, oh yeah, I need to say like, how do you do what you do? It's just I don't know. I just can't imagine. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm not called to that. So it's like, it's different
Yeah,
when
you've
you
got
feel
your
like
own
that's where you're
calling.
supposed to be.
Yeah, that's where I'm where I'm supposed to be. And
Yeah.
when we are where we are supposed to be, isn't it interesting how much more fulfilling, maybe sometimes
Mhm.
easier, manageable things become?
Yeah.
And so my advice, because that I think was your question, wasn't it? Was
Mhm.
what advice do I have for people who are dealing with these unimaginable things? Um, so first of all, it's to acknowledge and name what it is that you're suffering with,
Mm.
and then to hold space to feel it. There's two kind of cheesy sayings in my field. One is you need to name it to tame it.
Mm.
So if you don't talk about your trauma or your fear or your anger or your sadness or your despair, then it's not going to get quieted down. So you need to name it to tame it. So you
Mhm.
need to acknowledge it. And then the second is you need to feel it to heal it.
Mm.
So those would be like at a very basic level, those would be my two pieces of advice for folks, is to acknowledge it or name it to tame it, and then
Mhm.
to hold space, to walk through it, to process it, to feel it, because if you don't feel it, you can't heal it, or you need to
Mhm.
feel it to heal it, is another way to say that.
Mm.
What I want to add in there, kind of in line with what we're talking about here today, is that, in the field of psychology, we've come to, I think, generations of psychologists ago, this was known, but then it kind of fell out of vogue. I mean, the whole
Mhm.
division between spirit and secular world, there was a divide, but it's really neat within my field. Those things are being reintegrated.
Mm.
And, you know, some of us now embrace what's called spiritually integrated psychotherapy. So that means we're also holding space for our clients to talk about their spiritual lives, whether that be a source of hurt for them or whether that be a
Mhm.
source of sustenance for them. And for lots of decades, I think psychologists have been afraid to talk about that stuff. It's like, oh, we can't
Mhm.
can't talk to people about their faith or their beliefs. That's somehow wrong, which is how ridiculous.
Right.
We talk about everything else in my office, and by that I mean everything.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we talk about this central part of ourselves as well? And that doesn't mean every
Mhm.
client walks in with faith, and that's fine. I like
Mhm.
whether I'm at church or whether I'm at my work, or I hope whether I'm within my family. I like to try, I like to believe that I attempt at least to meet people where they're at, and make no judgments about where they're at or no suppositions of where they ought to be.
Mhm.
And but I guess my advice to myself in terms of helping people is to be open to the integration of spirit within psychotherapy.
Mm.
And, lots of days, I don't know what to say to some folks who are hurting in unimaginable ways. And, I maybe quietly in my head as I drive to work that day pray that I will have wisdom or words that need to be spoken that day with a particular client. So I may
Mm.
be alone in a room with a client, be that an individual or be that a couple, because I do couples therapy as well. Um, I may be alone, but I know I'm not alone. So
Mhm.
there's comfort in that.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. It's funny that you say that too, because I was literally going to ask that. So I'm glad that
Ah,
you talked about it. Well, I didn't have it written down, but it came into my mind just like what that integration kind of looks like, because I feel like it would be hard to kind of separate it when you're passionate about kind of both.
mm-hmm.
Well, I think
Yeah.
anyway. But um that's kind of all I had for questions and seasons. And if you have anything else that you feel like you were supposed to say, I told you the other day that you can pray on what you feel like you wanted to say. But if you have anything else, I'd love to hear about it.
Oh gosh, now you're putting me on the spot. Good question, but no, I know that we both kind of went into this today intentionally and prayerfully. And it's funny how often you've actually said to me, "Oh, it's funny that you brought that up. That
Yeah.
literally was on my mind, or that came to me, or I wanted to ask about that." So I hope we've done the work together today, Natalia,
Hmm.
that needed to be done or was called to be done. And
Mhm.
again, I will kind of just say what I said at the beginning, which is I hope that this conversation is of service or of comfort to those who may have listened.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm sure it will be. It was cool to walk through all the seasons because it's like you get to know people. Like I've been a part of your family for like almost 5 years, but it's like you don't get to hear the entirety of someone's story from, all those, like from not necessarily beginning, like childhood and growing up and all
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff, but kind of where your family has started and stuff. I don't get to hear that like a ton. So it was interesting that the Lord was just like, ask about the seasons. Like, I just want to hear about the seasons. So,
Actually,
yeah.
do you know what? We forgot one very important season. So if we've got time,
Yeah, for sure.
you might edit the heck out of me.
No, not at all. I'm not touching this one bit.
um, so Andrew's mom and his dad, whom you never met. So Pat was his mom, and I was gonna say Andrew was his dad. Andrew is Andrew. Dick is his dad. So beautiful people. I was honored to know them for as long as I did,
Hmm.
and I won't get into all the details, but I mean, they both died. Hard illnesses, hard deaths, I would say, especially Andrew's mom.
Hmm.
She wasn't very old when she died. Like, I don't mean she was 50. She was in her
Hmm.
70s. I'd have to do the math again. But anyway, she died too young, and she died of a very awful illness. And one very specific season in our family was when Andrew and his siblings, his three siblings, were all so attentive to their mom. And that was largely in Edmonton. Eventually, she did die in Calgary, but there was a lot of time that Andrew was away in Edmonton, leaving me behind with our children to kind of hold down the fort. And I'm not I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back or say, aren't I great? I'm not saying that at all, because there's so many ways in which I'm not great. Um, but I was never bitter about Andrew being away because I knew that he was where he needed to be, which is caring for an aging and dying parent who had lost so much of her own abilities and was very much dependent on her family to advocate for her medical care when she could no longer literally speak for herself, because one of the
Hmm.
things that she lost as a result of her illness was her ability to communicate.
Hmm.
And I just felt like, Pat, this woman who I adored and who taught me actually so much about faith. She's pretty cool. She was a
Hmm.
physiotherapist like me. She was in healthcare. She retired early. She went back to
Hmm.
school. She got her bachelor's degree, and then her master's degree in
Hmm.
theology in her retirement. That's what she did. And so she
So
was just
cool.
a font of knowledge. I loved my conversations with her. She would have been a great guest for you, and you would have loved to have
Yeah.
known her, and she would have loved to have known you. So this woman that I adored was being looked after by my husband and my in-laws. And selfishly, because again, I'm not a perfect person, I'm kind of selfish sometimes. Selfishly, I thought, this is a brilliant example that my children's father is setting for how to look after aging and dying parents. And so
Hmm.
I pray that one day when I may be that woman, that my own children will follow the example of their father, Andrew, in being kind and loving and faithful and attentive to those who are in need. So, yeah, Andrew was pretty brilliant. He is, and he was at that season of our life.
Mm. One doesn't really talk about that, season either. So I've actually really never heard that.
Well, he damn well better remember it so that he looks after his mother. You tell him.
Well, he listens to every episode, so he'll get here and then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Actually, one question that I did have, which would kind of just be a fun way to end off, but no one really talks about this in their mothering journey. But what's it like to be a mother-in-law? Because it's a really interesting aspect to motherhood that no one really talks about, and I thought it would be perfect to ask you.
Wow. Um, it is a gift to be a mother-in-law. One thing Andrew and I pray for pretty regularly is that good people come into our children's lives, and that certainly is the case. Good people have come into our children's lives, including you, of course, and so it's an honor to be a mother-in-law. It's fascinating to get to know this person that my child has chosen, and I must say that my son has chosen very well, and I'm confident both my sons and my daughter will choose very well, have chosen very well, in fact. And I just, as a mother in law, I'm filled with gratitude that my son has a partner who is faith filled and who looks after him so very, very well, so that he can, I hope, do what he is supposed to do and is called to do, and in support of you and your eventual family.
Yeah, thanks. I've
Yeah.
never asked anyone what it's like. Not even like my mom, like, oh yeah, I mean, like what it specifically is like to be a mother-in-law, because it's like you're called a mother-in-law for a reason. You're not just like my husband's mother. So, you get
Ooh,
to create.
that's a good one. I never thought about that term, mother-in-law. I bet that means something. Like,
Yeah,
hmm,
I don't know.
it's a legalistic term, but I don't know. I feel like we've
Maybe.
got way more than a legalistic relationship, that I'm your
Yeah.
mother in the name of
In
the
the law.
law or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, I think it's just another opportunity, I hope, for me as a woman
Hmm.
to grow, maybe to serve. Um, yeah, I'm you're making me think on that, and I want to reflect on that more. So thank you for
Mm.
asking the question, even though I'm not giving a very articulate answer to it.
Yeah, no, you gave a good
It's a
answer.
thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
Thank you for these questions and this conversation, and I'm honored that you asked me. I thought, what do I have to offer this woman, you, Natalia? You've got so many strong and faith-filled, wise women around you. I honestly thought, okay, what can I offer?
No, I'm glad that you had the time, because I know you're super busy and you've got these cute little plants growing that you're just obsessed with. So I'm glad that you had the time to sit down. It's yeah, it means the world to have people that I'm close to and people that I just met, and just a variety of people who get to pour into women in a way that I can't, and share things that I can and journeys that I can't. So that was really just, I feel like you just perfectly encompassed about what this podcast, like what I wanted it to be. So I'm really glad that you got to sit down with me.
I am too. Thank you very, very much, Natalia, and God bless you in your journey and in your work.
Thank you. You
Okay.
too.
Cheers.
Okay. Bye.
Good night.